Alright, I am about to make a really crappy YouTube video about, I'm really bad at videos, so sorry. Hi. But we've got a way now to make these beautiful old FD super telephoto lenses work on EOS camera bodies without optical adapters. As many of you are aware, when they switched over to EF, the registration distance from the lens to the sensor moved from 42 to 44 millimeters, which meant that no old manual focus lens would work on the newer Canon bodies around 1987 when they switched over to EOS and they started making EOS bodies. Canon for a while made an optical adapter, a 1.26 times rough magnification, which was a mild teleconverter that made some of these longer telephoto lenses work, but every time, as you're aware, we use extenders, as Canon calls them, or teleconverters as most other people call them. There's a lot of image quality loss. You can really, if you're a pixel peeper like I am, you can really tell. It really smudges the details. So, you know, basically using these lenses with those cheap optical adapters that are out there historically has just meant that the performance you get out of them is not much better than you're going to get out of a typical decent consumer zoom. Sure, when you're talking the 800mm lens, you know, to get there, you know, you'd have to basically looking at some of the reflex lenses or the mirror lenses to get that kind of resolving power, but just it wasn't anything to write home about. So the modern day stuff is great, but it costs, you know, $10,000 to $15,000. So not everyone, including myself, has that type of budget to for the type of mucking around that I do. So anyway, I'm EdMika. I kind of bought one of these lenses, in fact originally a 600mm lens, and decided to find a way to make it work, and ultimately after a couple of well, more than a couple of tries, I came up with an adapter that made it work. The whole story actually could be read on canonrumors.com. There's an article that's on there that if you want to go into the details, but for most of you that have come to this YouTube video, the point that you're here to do is figure out how the heck do you make these things work. Well, with the 800 and 600mm lenses, it's really simple. You buy my adapter. It's called the EdMika 0.75mm adapter, and then you basically just put it on and you're ready to shoot. Some of them you find that it'll be handy to get a little bit more focusing distance than was originally there, because there's a bit of focusing past infinity already built into these. But to get a little bit more, you take these 4 screws off this gear housing. There's an instruction actually on my Flickr thing and actually on the auction for these on the listing on eBay, it has instructions on how to do the conversion. But it's basically take these 4 screws off, unscrew this thing. There's a focus stop. You just take it out, maybe tape it inside so that it's still all original, can go back to original, and then put it all back together again. No big deal. So it just gives you a little bit, makes that focusing element move a little bit farther forward, which gives you infinity focus with just this. So with the big ones, with the 600, 800, you're ready to go. Now with the smaller ones, with just the adapter, we are only getting 50 meters of focusing distance with the 400, and a little bit less with the 300. Really nice lenses, great bokeh, just didn't focus very far with the EdMika 0.75mm lens. So I've gone and found a way. I basically took them all apart to figure out what could be done to get these things to work on EOS that was non-destructive, that was reversible, but that would allow them to work on EOS bodies, but still immediately after, with the removal of the EdMika adapter, work on FD bodies as well. So you can switch between your nice new f1 and your 1D Mark IV or whatever you're shooting with, 5D Mark II or 3 coming up hopefully soon. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit stop, and then I'm going to walk through the philosophy of what you do here is actually similar, is almost exactly the same with both. We're going to do 2 things to each one of these. One, we're going to allow the focusing movement to go a little bit further, and 2, we're going to recalibrate the position of that focusing element. Right now, each has a focusing element. To go to when it's focusing the farthest away objects, the focusing element is as far forward as possible. Both of them have that focus element attached with 2 flathead screws on a slot, and it's in the middle of that slot. What we're going to basically do is loosen both sides of that slot, the screws, and we're going to shift it forward as far as it can go with the slots, and then retighten it. That's it. So we're going to retighten, move the focusing elements as far forward as possible within the existing calibration slot that Canon has put in there in the first place, and we're going to remove, in both cases, the focusing stop. We're going to keep the screws in for it because they'll act as the new stop, but we're going to remove the brass plate that does the current stopping, and you can put that aside so that you can have the thing go back to original if you want. Now, I do have plans that I'm working on right now for a 0.5 millimeter adapter that actually it's even thinner, and it gets over the typical close proximity of the aperture lever to your to the electronics bezel. Like, I don't know if you can see there, but my 1D Mark IV has some nice tattoo marks, scoring marks here on the electronics bezel from testing various lenses. Some of, especially the non-Canon ones, have even longer aperture levers, so they've dug a nice little groove here. Some of you may not be too thrilled about that on your cameras. The way I've got it at a 0.75, the reason we chose 0.75 was it's the closest we could get to that within the realm of the Canon FD lenses, the new FD ones, which are really the ones I tested, that it will not mark your camera. What we're looking to do is actually rotating the adapter 90 degrees so that aperture lever will end up here inside the camera box, outside of the swing path of the mirror, so that it'll never come anywhere near to where the electronics bezel is. This damage here is just aesthetic. It's superficial. It doesn't actually affect any functioning of your camera, but I'd really like to get that thing away from there. And then actually what's nice about going to the 0.5 is it'll get us closer to that 42 millimeter original design intent for these lenses, where, you know, right now it's 44 plus whatever the thickness of adapter you're using, and we're using 0.75, which is about as thin as it gets that you can buy. By you know, again, by rotating that and moving that aperture lever here, your lenses will all be sideways. With the super telephotos, it's not a big deal because they can all rotate anywhere you want. The reason it's 90 degrees is they have click stops at each quarter, so I wouldn't want to move it 20 degrees and then, you know, when you moved your lens and clicked it, it wouldn't be, you know, horizontal or vertical. So that's coming, and if that works as I expect it to, we may only, with these lenses, we may only have to do one of those two things I described. We may only need to do the focus element recalibration. I would really like to be able to leave that focus stop in as original, so that you don't have something to lose. You know, when you take it out of the camera, you know, hopefully we're all organized, but, well, I'm not. So, you know, that may be coming, but for now, the 0.75 millimeter adapter works perfectly with these two, with those two fairly easy changes, which I'm going to now do. So I'm just going to hit stop for a second, take a breather, and start again.